And we will call this to order at 8:06. Mr. Secretary, would you go ahead and call the roll?
Mr. Olmsted,
Here.
Barber,
Mr. Barber indicated last week he wouldn't be here this week.
Benner,
Here.
Bergman,
Here.
Bowman,
Here.
Brooksbank,
Here.
Toko,
Here.
Eiler,
Here.
Zer,
Here.
Johnson,
Present.
Labrie,
Here.
Leatherman,
Here.
McGoes,
Here.
Melchin,
Here.
That is an absent. I'm here. Mr. Seebeck is here. Joel, Thompson,
Thompson's here.
Ware, Mr. Ware.
He's not here.
Okay. Go through the alternates. Chatterton, Edwards, Clift, Gonzalez, Goodley, Carlos,
Um, she just got here.
All right, I'm hearing crosstalk. Can we make sure our mics are muted, please? Marinovich, Matz,
Mattis is here.
Osborne, Redman, Rogers,
I'm here.
Romig. I'm sorry,
Here.
Romig.
Yeah.
Did you, Mr. Romig? Did you say here?
Yes, Romig is here.
Thank you. Veldhuizen.
Here.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I see 15 primaries present. Are any of the alternates to be seated?
I have 16 present, actually.
Let me recount. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I still come up with 15. Who am I missing?
The absences I have here as Mr. Barber, Mr. Shull, and Mr. Weir.
Mr. Melchin, unless I didn't hear him, also is absent.
He is here.
Okay. So that's 16. Our quorum is 11.
Okay. There is no alternate for Ohio. There's no alternate present for Georgia, and there is no alternate for New Hampshire. So, and all of the LNC folks are here. For guests, I see Miss Jessica Tewksbury and Mr. Larry Silver.
Thank you. Anyone else? Just now.
That covers almost everybody.
Okay. Thank you.
Alrighty, public comment. To Ms. Tewksbury and Mr. Silver. Do you wish to address the committee?
No, thanks.
I had nothing prepared.
Any members of the committee for public comment? Okay, hearing none, we'll get into it. First proposal up is the proposal put forth by Mr. Benner and Mr. Verhuizen regarding a reworking of the 3.4 plank for free trade and migration. This is not to be confused with the one that we had already looked at prior. It's a different one. So with no further ado, I will ask either Mr. Benner or Mr. Verhuizen to speak about their proposal. Which one of you wants to do it?
I would like to, if that's all right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So libertarians are very divided on borders and immigration. That's no secret to anyone here, I'm sure. This is actually not a very emotionally charged issue for me, though I know it is for many libertarians. Some believe that our ideology demands open borders. Others believe that the libertarian ideal is to scrap public lands and essentially privatize them all, allowing individual discretion to the private property owners. And still others believe in some kind of sponsorship program. Beyond that, a lot of people, care more about the fact that the Constitution doesn't give the feds these powers. So this amendment seeks to try to resolve that, all wrapped into a single amendment. I suspect there's a very good chance this plank gets removed through the token process, and although I or no one else can really guarantee that, this amendment seeks to provide something more palatable to the broad spectrum of libertarians as an alternative to scrapping it altogether. Because let's face it, scrapping it would include scrapping language that's completely uncontroversial regarding free trade. Now, speaking personally, I do favor open borders where there is a state, but I also feel that there's two major problems with the current wording. Namely, A, it presumes state ownership over the commons, which is something many libertarians, especially anarchists, don't believe in, and the implication that geopolitical borders are obligatory in a libertarian order. So that's controversial along the same lines. The ideal of many libertarians, especially anarchists, again, as I said, is complete privatization, including all the commons and all the borderlands with no geopolitical borders whatsoever. Last thing I say is that I don't know that the language is perfect. It's our best effort, and credit to Mr. Veldhuizen who drafted it. And I expect to see healthy debate on it, and it deserves that given the divisiveness of this topic. Thank you.
Alrighty, I have in the following order, Mr. Alsted, Mr. Verhuizen, Ms. Harlos, and Mr. Chilko. But before we get to them, I will state the wording of the proposal. This is for plank 3.4 free trade and migration. Striking out and replacing. First, strike out the first full sentence. We support the removal of government impediments to free trade. Striking out the second sentence, political freedom and escape from tyranny demand that individuals not be unreasonably constrained by government in the crossing of political boundaries. Third sentence has some is still here, but has some deletions and changes to it. So it would say economic freedom demands the, strike the word unrestricted, free movement of, strike of human as well as financial capital, across national borders, add the words of financial capital and goods. I'm going to reread that sentence as to what it will look like because it's a little choppy. Economic freedom demands the free movement across national borders of financial capitals and goods. Okay, the rest of this is all new. However, since immigration affects individual and community property rights as well as security concerns, it is a matter that should be determined at the lowest authority levels possible. Federal subsidization of unrestricted migration by providing free housing, transportation, and medical care is a violation of the property rights of taxpayers and communities. Ideally, all government land should be privatized, and each landowner should be entitled to invite foreign guests onto their own property. Until such time as government is divested of all public lands, vetted individuals who pose no security concerns sponsored by U.S. persons should be admitted. And hopefully everybody can see that on the screen at this point with apologies to Ms. Eiler who's on the phone. Mr. Alstead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I was a little confused. Right at just barely at the top of your screen, it says "add new plank." This is
That's actually a typo.
Yeah, that's
right.
my
It's not a
fault.
proposal to add a new plank, right? Okay. I
No,
was just
and that's not a. There's no need to move to change
okay.
that. That's just a
Yeah. I was just confused. The some of the wording, since immigration affects individual and community property rights as well as security concerns. What I mean, just from a grammatical point of view, you're saying it affects security concerns, which is redundant. I mean, I would, or awkwardly worded, perhaps. So I guess I'd like to make a motion to change, propose an amendment to change security concerns to national security.
That would be in order. This would be. All righty. Is there anybody wish to speak? Excuse me. Let me try that again without my tongue in a knot. Is there anybody wishes to speak on the amendment?
I want to speak on both, but if Mr. Val, I can't ever pronounce your name, Albert. If he does as well, I'm behind him, but I'd like to be in line for both.
Mr. Velhuizen, do you wish to speak to the amendment or just the main?
I'd just like to speak to the main.
All righty. I had Mr. Brooksbank jump in. Mr. Benner, did you wish to speak to the main or to the amendment?
Just the amendment.
Okay. Mr. Chokel, same question.
I guess I don't need to speak on the amendment, just the main.
Mr. Brooksbank, same question.
Just the main.
Mr. Enser, same question.
Main.
Okay. Then in that case, Ms. Harless, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't have any voting rights, so I guess it doesn't ultimately matter, but I do think I speak for a certain block of the party. I'm against the main, but I think this amendment makes the main like 10 times worse because now it's at least before I could have soothed my wounded quills by saying, well, those security concerns can be about individual property owners because I've heard the stories of people at the border, they're finding dead bodies and crap on their property, that could be diseased or whatever. But the minute you add in national security concerns, now you are importing the entire security state. And that just makes it like completely unpalatable. And I think takes away with one hand, gives with one hand with what our national security plank takes away with the other. You might as well just say hail Homeland Security as far as I'm concerned with that kind of language. Absolutely opposed. Like it made, and no offense to the plank, Dave, I actually think you did a really good job of trying to walk the line. You know why I oppose it. I do appreciate the effort you put to try to tread that line, but this makes it, if we thought it would be difficult to pass before, this would make it impossible. Maybe I should vote for it. I can't vote for it. Maybe I should be in favor of it because I think that tanks it right there. Because you say national security concerns to a convention of libertarians, Mr. Chair, be ready to dodge tomatoes.
I would point out the chair might agree with those sentiments, not the tomatoes. Mr. Benner.
Yeah, I echo many of the same concerns that Miss Harlos has, but come at it from a slightly different angle. I oppose the amendment because half of us don't believe in the concept of nations beyond, the fact that the national security inference is a dangerous one or an unpalatable one to most libertarians. So I would oppose that and appreciate the time. Thank you.
Ms. Leatherman.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to speak to the main if possible after everyone else.
Okay, I'll put you in the queue. Is there any further debate on the amendment? Mr. Alsted?
Yeah, I'd just like to say, I didn't realize national was going to be so triggering. I thought it was sort of implied by security. And I don't really care. I'm not married to that word. I just really don't like poorly written as a OCD guy. It bothers me when the grammatical errors. So I just want the word concerns out of there. But if people don't like national, it wouldn't break my heart.
Mr. Bowman?
So,
Yeah, I personally kind of I think inserting national also doesn't fit in with what comes after it. We got comma. It is a matter that should be determined at the lowest authority levels possible. What the rest seems to imply is a fairly I'm looking for agorist or ANACAP view that you can have at the lowest level you'd have property rights, but above that you got the or in a, other than that we could also have the localization viewpoint, which might be that simply people who have communities, people coming to their community from the border, but people in the neighboring border community may not have a problem. So that would go against the whole national thing, I think, also. And also, finally, the phrase national security, I'm kind of an old guy, and I've heard that phrase just used again and again as an excuse for pretty much anything the feds want to do.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bowman. Is there any further debate on the amendment? All righty, since there's obviously objection, Mr. Alsted, do you wish to speak to the amendment still?
yeah, could I just withdraw the amendment? I mean, it clearly isn't going to pass. And
Is there
save everybody the
objection from the
trouble.
body to withdrawing the amendment? Hearing none, it'll be withdrawn. One quick moment. All righty, we are back to the top level. And I had, in the following order, Mr. Veldhuizen, Ms. Carlos, Mr. Choco, Mr. Enstrom, Mr. Brooksbank, and Mr. Leatherman. Mr. Bowman, is there hands up to speak on the main, or is that a residual?
A residual, I will lower it.
Okay. Mr. Veldhuizen.
Yeah, so I'd like to piggyback on what Dave Benner said and go more into depth as to the reasoning behind this this proposal. So, without a doubt, immigration is the hottest issue this election year, and it's an important problem that we need to address in order to remain relevant. And libertarians can be on both sides of the issues. They're open border libertarians, or they're more closed border libertarians based on a property rights analysis. But I believe that in order to be honest, we would not condone the human and property rights trespasses and violations that come with our current system, with the migrants and the cartels every single day at the southern border violating private lands. And I put a link about that in the chat. We also can't condone the government, stealing from the taxpayers in order to provide illegal migrants with prepaid credit cards, with free housing and hotels, free healthcare, free food, and other benefits, really to the tune of billions of dollars. So in the Mises article that I also mentioned in the chat, it says that what is the effect of subsidizing a particular product or activity, which usually is the same everywhere we look. You get more of what you subsidize. So this is true of student loans, it's true of ethanol, it's true of migrants. And economic theory tells us that the government can't possibly know the correct number of migrants, nor should the regime be free to centrally plan some arbitrary number. On the other hand, it's extremely unlikely that the number of migrants, even with lax border enforcement, would be as high as it is today without the regime's incessant subsidization of migrants, both legal and illegal. And that article gives a whole bunch of examples of how that happens. So on another point, as a matter of principle, I'm totally opposed to all foreign aid, whether it's to Israel, to Ukraine, or any other nation. And foreign aid is basically the forced redistribution of our taxpayer dollars to foreign individuals, whether they be corrupt governments, government officials, or the funds that those governments trickle down to their people. Well, likewise, our subsidized migration system today is the forced redistribution of our taxpayer dollars to foreign individuals who have come here without permission. So if you oppose foreign aid, you must also, on principle, oppose subsidized immigration. And you can't talk about open borders without addressing this issue, which is interwoven really in today's immigration crisis. So unfortunately, as the current migration plank reads, most Americans would see it as an implicit endorsement of what is happening now, unrestricted subsidized immigration. At a minimum, we have to make it clear that we do not favor rights violations and forced taxpayer subsidization of immigration. And while most open border libertarians, proclaim a desire to dismantle both borders and the welfare state, in practice, what they offer is open borders today and a vague promise to end the welfare state in the indefinite future. And as Milton Friedman understood, open border enthusiasts have the sequence wrong. Opening borders with the redistribution of states still intact will result in a larger and more confiscatory government for us all. And so we've seen this demonstrated in practice before our very eyes, and this is what most Americans are quite upset about. And so this issue of subsidization is what clearly needs to be addressed. But the other point that's addressed in this proposal is the issue of the lowest level possible. So what we need to advance is the libertarian concept that authority should be concentrated at the lowest levels possible. First comes the individual, of course. And just as an individual should have the right to invite any foreign guest, he should also have the right to exclude migrants from his property. And this property right is being violated every single day by illegal migrants. The next level of authority is a group of individuals composing a community. Communities have the right to be sanctuary cities, just as they should have the right to restrict migration into their communities. So there's no inherent right to trespass onto individual property or community property. And the next level after that is the state, and the feds being the most removed from the consequences of migration upon individuals and communities should have the least to say in immigration matters and should defer to the wishes of individuals and communities. Therefore, if an American individual or business wants to invite a foreign person, the Fed should provide deference to that choice. If a community wants to liberally admit or not admit foreign nationals, it should be that community's choice. As long as the feds are involved in immigration policy, though, they should defer to individual and local requests. If there is no evidence of clear violations of the non-aggression principle by those being invited, then they should be let in. as if they're invited. And this is how it works to a certain extent in Switzerland, because in Switzerland, local communities determine immigration and naturalization policy. And quoting from the link that I put in the chat, it says, for persons wishing to enter Switzerland for a stay of more than 90 days within a 180-day period, it is subject to the authorization of the cantonal migration authority competent for the intended place of residence. So I believe their system is far superior to what we're doing. Migration naturalization should be determined at the local level, but enforced at the borders by federal authorities, as long as we have a federal government. Now, throughout history, there's never been an unlimited right to travel, either for individuals or group of individuals, because that so-called right abuts against the property rights of other individuals and communities. The history of humanity is a history of individuals and groups of individuals violating the property rights of other individuals and groups of individuals by encroaching upon their territory. So if we believe in self-defense of our persons and property, we must also believe in the right to exclude others from trespassing onto our territory. And our territory as Americans begins at our borders. And as Americans, we have certain rights and privileges inherent in our citizenship, such as the right to travel throughout our country. And those rights and privileges are exclusive to us. They don't belong to every single individual in the world. There is no inherent right of a foreigner to travel in our lands. Therefore, I hope that you seriously consider the proposal that Dave and I put forward. Thanks.
Ms. Harless.
Okay, I'm just muting, but I should get ready to go. Okay, but first I want to know, who is this R you're speaking of? Libertarians believe in the rights of the individual. There is no community rights. What they are is a bunch of individuals that just have agreed on something, but it's not a community right. It's still an individual right. Well, first I want to say, it was saying, well, this is countenancing trespassing into private property. While I don't like to give much credit to the people who were trying to, rewrite our platform after the Portland massacre, on this one, I think they threaded the needle quite well. They worded this very carefully. Demand that individuals, I don't like the unreasonably, so I'm just going to pretend like it's not there, not be constrained by government in the crossing of what? All boundaries? No, political ones, not private ones. And everyone misses that. That is already bound up in here. And if we're going to say, I heard the word centrally planned in the last commenter. Well, this is exactly what's trying to be done here. You're trying to centrally plan liberty, that we got to get rid of this one thing before we can get rid of another thing. And since there were some quotes before, I'm going to quote on the article that changed my mind on this issue and made me believe that you cannot centrally plan liberty. And it's from Thomas Knapp, and it's called Against Stockholm Libertarianism. And I hope everyone reads it. He says, ladies and gentlemen, what we have here is a hostage situation. It's a neat scam, this holding of one reform hostage, while around the corner, your political enemies hold its counterpart hostage as well. You won't let your hostage go until they let their hostage go. And they won't let their hostage go until you let yours go. And they'd really rather you didn't. No muss, no fuss. You both successfully avoided responsibility. They've avoided doing something they don't want to do anyway. And you've avoided doing something you claim you want to, but are looking for an excuse not to. But it's cleverly disguised as practical political necessity. Now I'm also going to quote David Nolan. Oh, this is a big issue. We're not going to be taken seriously. Well, you want to know what David Nolan said the last time that we perhaps compromise on hard libertarian principles? He said, we've tried that and they still didn't vote for us. So don't tell me that we have to do this for us to vote for us, because they still didn't vote for us before. Now, let me tell you about unintended consequences. There could have been good arguments, allegedly, when there's times of, say, public health crisis for quarantines and the like. But something we have learned, I heard here, this theory and that theory. You want to know what theory freedom goes upon? Chaos theory. And that one little change, you never know the ripple effects it's going to have. If you study the 1918 flu, which unfortunately I had a lot, so when this whole thing came around, it felt like I was living history. You want to know why it attacked like the weirdest groups of people, babies and young people? Because the older people were allowed to go through a really horrific pandemic when they were young and they developed a certain kind of immunity. We claim that we want to reduce the state. Some of us claim we want to eliminate the state. Maybe showing the disaster of all of these kinds of subsidies is the way to do it. Sometimes you have to, I know I might be speaking a little bit of collapsitarian here, but maybe that is the only way it's going to happen, to bring things to a pain point. You cannot centrally plan history. Who would have thought that the assassination of Ferdinand would have led to what it did? It was such a random act. And if we're going to talk about stealing, that is not the fault of the people coming in. We already call out this stealing. And I'm not claiming, please hear me, I am not claiming that the motivation for this is xenophobic. But why are we calling out immigrants? We wouldn't say, well, we really don't believe in telling people how many kids they can have. But these people with 10 kids, we got to sterilize them after 2 because they're stealing from us. We have to pay for them to have all of these kids. Nearly every argument you can use against open immigration, you could use to justify nearly any statist policy on the planet. However, I want to read you something from what I thought was the best platform we had. And I didn't agree with it, but I think this might be a healthy medium where neither of us are happy, but neither of us are miserable. I don't really like the first part, but I liked this sentence. They said that we call for the elimination of all restrictions on immigration. And this is back when the Libertarian Party was Libertarian AF. The abolition of the Immigration and Naturalization Service and the Border Patrol, and a declaration of full amnesty for all people who have entered the country illegally. But here's the sentence. I don't like it, but I don't hate it. We oppose government welfare and resettlement payments to non-citizens, just as we oppose government welfare payments to all other persons. It does single out immigrants, but at least it points out that it's not just them. All of this does not make sense with the rest of our platform. This sounds like it belongs in a Republican platform. I'm sorry. This is not a hardcore libertarian message. If you want to stick in a sentence that welfare bad, okay, I can live with that. And I don't think we should be subsidizing anybody. And there is a huge problem with the subsidization now. It is definitely a political plan, but we can't sell our souls to political fear. Let's remain libertarian. One last thing. I disagree with Mr. Benner that anarchists do not believe in the commons. There's plenty of anarchists who do. I am one of them. Roderick is one of them. And no, we do not have different rights than other people. And the type of commons I am talking about is the right of ingress and egress, that there is a natural right for all persons to be able to move from one place to another. It can be as narrow or as wide as community standards dictate. But this solves the problem that I think Rothbard got completely wrong on the donut problem. Are you allowed to completely encircle somebody so that they're trapped in their land? No. You can't do it with a country, and you can't do it with a parcel of property. You cannot enclose somebody in that way. That is, in fact, aggression. Thank you.
Mr. Shoko.
Thank you. So I had quite a bit to say, but honestly, Ms. Harlow's said pretty much all of it right there. So you could just put me down as a second for everything that she said. I will mention that the only thing in here that I see as sort of reasonable is this mentioning of subsidization and how we oppose it. So if somebody came up with some good wording for that, I might be able to support that. But this one, it's just got too many problems with it. And as soon as we talk about security concerns, which are mentioned twice in here, we might as well say that the state can keep out anyone for any reason they feel like, because that's what the state does. Everything is a security concern. So, I don't know why I'm focusing on that particular language here. That's an obvious bad one, but there's a lot in here that doesn't work. And I'll be opposing this. And like I said, if somebody wants to come up with a simple sentence about opposing subsidization, maybe I could consider supporting that. Although I think it's pretty clear elsewhere in the platform that we oppose subsidization of just about everything, or not just about, of literally everything. So yeah, I'm not supporting. I agree with everything Ms. Harlow says. Thanks.
Mr. Ensor.
So I have two things actually. I wanted to speak in favor of the main motion, but I also had an amendment to offer, and it actually is in line, I think kind of in line with what Mr. Cholko had said before. So would that be in order for me to offer the amendment first, and then after we dispense with it, to speak on the main motion?
I would keep you in the queue for the main motion after the amendment would be disposed of.
Oh, that's fine. I'll go ahead. The main motion concerns with I don't know what number it is, but the federal subsidization of unrestricted migration by providing free housing, transportation, and medical care is a violation of the property rights of taxpayers and communities. I think it's a decent sentence, but I think it's overly wordy. And as somebody mentioned in the chat, why specify just federal? So here's the amendment I'd like to offer. The word federal, just replace it with government. It's a couple things I'd like to do.
What else?
And the second thing, strike out unrestricted, because I think doesn't need to be. I think it's just government subsidization of migration. I think that covers it. And I understand what he was getting at with specifying examples, but I think it's not
Mr. Answer,
necessary.
one interruption, please.
Go ahead.
The chair is looking at, first of all, are there any other proposed amendments that you wish to add to this? Let me ask that.
There was one more. I wanted to strike out by providing free housing, transportation, and medical care, because I just think that simply saying we're opposed to government subsidization of migration, we don't necessarily have to add a laundry list of specifications of the way they do that.
All right. I'm going to suggest to you, Mr. Ensor, that because you have 3 amendments to this sentence, and you could argue very reasonably that all 3 of them, while they're in the same sentence, relate to different issues with the sentence, that we take them one piece at a time for the purposes of simplicity. I would suggest that we look at the federal government strike and replace part first, followed by the unrestricted strike, followed by providing free housing, transportation, medical care strike, just for the sake of keeping it simple.
Okay, but would that mean I just offered 3 amendments at the same time?
Can't go more than 2 deep. I'm suggesting we take that you hold back the other 2 until we deal with the first one.
Okay. Yeah, that's fine. I think the first one is probably the most pressing.
I'm not trying to dissuade you. I'm just trying to keep this as clean as possible.
No, I'm fine with it. I hope the committee is fine with it as well.
Ms. Harlow's point on the chat, you would need to strike and replace the whole sentence also. So breaking this up would be a better way to handle it. So that being said, we'll treat the first part of this as strike the word federal and replace with the word government. So, Mr. Ensor, do you wish to speak to that real quick? Because that was your first amendment.
Okay. Well, first of all, you mentioned the chat. I was just looking, and they are saying that it might be better to be in order to make it just a strike and replace, and that would make it like one whole thing. I sorry, I feel like I've kind of stepped in a bit of a mess with this.
Well,
I'll tell you what, I'll just withdraw my second and third strikeouts because it was more for the sake of brevity. The first one is like a material amendment, so let's just do that.
All right, without objection. All right, so we'll just leave it with the proposed amendment is to strike the word federal, replace it with government. All right.
Yes.
Is there anyone wishing to speak on the amendment?
I mean, I'd like to.
Go ahead.
So the purpose of this is the fact that while we do see a lot of federal subsidization of the of migration at times, it's not exclusive to the federal level, and we oppose it at all levels of government. Some people had mentioned, we should say state instead. Well, because of the way that the American political system works, state is kind of equivocal language, because that in and of itself could potentially be interpreted as one specific layer of the government. So I'm simply saying, just say government subsidization and just deal with it all.
Does anyone else wish to speak to the amendment? Okay, I still have Mr. Brooksbank, Ms. Leatherman, Mr. Bowman, and myself in the queue for the main. Hearing no further debate on the amendment, I will ask first, is there objection to the amendment? Hearing none, the amendment passes. So we will strike out the word federal, capitalize the word government, which should have been in the first place, but there we go. And we will get the formatting correct. No, that's not what I'm trying to do. There. All righty. Mr. Brooksbank, you are next in the queue on the main.
Okay, I just want to say that I'm going to be voting against this because I'm just really in favor of the way that the original was written, and I would like to keep it just the way it is. Thank you.
All righty, Ms. Leatherman?
Yeah, I also just wanted to say, I feel like, Mr. Chilko and Ms. Harlow's already covered most of this, but just wanted to point out that this, in my opinion, just endorses the idea that the state should have control over borders, which are merely imaginary lines on a map. And I believe that's an idea which is counterproductive to liberty, and which also routinely leads to the violation of the property rights of people who live in border regions, as well as the individual rights of people who are of U.S. citizens who are trying to travel between the U.S. and other countries. So, yeah, as Ron Paul pointed out, any border that can be used to keep people out can also be used to keep people in. And then I also wanted to speak to the second sentence on government subsidization. That, in my opinion, is superfluous, since that's already, our opposition to subsidization is already implied by the finances and spending plank. So I don't really think that adds anything. And in my opinion, the Libertarian Party platform should describe an ideal libertarian society, as opposed to making concessions such as this to in order to make ourselves sound less threatening to people who aren't completely on board, or who, or in order to appeal to certain other crowds. So I will be voting no on this.
All right, thank you, Ms. Leatherman. I'm going to speak on this. I put myself in the queue at this point. There's a lot of problems with this that I see. Leaving aside striking out the first sentence, which I think needs to stay in because that specifically relates to free trade. And if we take that out, then the whole title is wrong. The second sentence has been a lot of controversy in the party about the term unreasonably constrained. We're not talking about that here, but that was brought up in the past, and striking the whole sentence is kind of throwing out that baby in the bathwater. The third sentence, even if we take out the unrestricted, which I'm not sure is the right answer, it's the original plank still has that problem of human capital. And there's an issue there with the accusations of human trafficking, which we can address elsewhere. And I believe that there is a different proposal attaching that, attached to that somewhere else. That being said, the rest of it, immigration does affect individual rights. There is no such thing as community property rights. It is a national security concern. That being said, the objections to the terminology are well-founded. But moving a national security level or a border security level to a local level, like what's currently happening in Texas, which the Supreme Court also worked on today, it creates a paradox. And that doesn't fit in here either. Government subsidization, whether it's migration or otherwise, really doesn't even belong on this plank at all. We're talking about the movement of goods, capital, and people across borders, not subsidization within those borders. So that doesn't even really fit into this plank at all. The privatization of government lands is way too broad of a statement. Does that include federal courthouses, federal prisons? All righty. It's too vague of a term. Does it include military bases, national parks? I mean, there's a lot of different areas there. Does it include the U.S. Capitol, the White House, the Smithsonian? Lots of vagueness there. And divesting of all public lands, same problem. Vetted individuals who pose no security threat. Well, okay, here's the situation. Who determines that? The government, the feds. But yet you want to have that determined at the lowest authority levels possible. Well, I seem to remember a few years back, we had this thing called MEAC, which was out of Missouri. This was about 2008 or so. And they tried to make the determination libertarians were terrorists. I kid you not. I myself and a bunch of us in the party at the time, we raised holy hell over that because we knew perfectly well it was complete nonsense. And they were forced to back down. This is why I will die on the hill of defending the pledge. But relevant to here, when the people who determine who the security threats are the same ones who are determined whether they want to throw you into a gitmo or lock you up without a trial or accuse you of insurrection when all you're doing is wandering around a public building, or even not even that, or even just standing there doing nothing, I'm sorry, but we got a problem there. This puts too much power in the hands of the people who are most likely to abuse it. And I think that that's a major problem with this. I'm not a fan of open borders. I'm not a fan of closed borders. I'm a fan of managed borders. But this is going too far in the opposite direction as well. So I would be voting against this. And I would encourage this to be revisited with some better wording. Mr. Bowman.
Okay. Hello. I thought that this had a lot of admirable ideas in here. Some of the stuff I like includes the part about privatizing land, letting landowners decide who to admit or not to admit onto their land. That all fits well with what I would view as a very strong libertarian perspective. However, the flavor of this seems to play into the stereotype that people are just coming here because the government's giving them these freebies. And that's who immigrants are. They're people coming here to get freebies from the government, from our government, taking our tax dollars to live off us. And it doesn't square with reality. The Cato Institute did some research some years back, and I assume that nothing's really gone against, there hasn't been a radical shift in facts that would make it otherwise, as far as comparing people's use of public resources, so-called public resources, government assistance, use of welfare, use of other government programs, by people who are native to this country as compared to people who are immigrants, and also compared to people, whether or not they are documented, so-called, or legal versus illegal, however you want to phrase that, and found that there wasn't really that strong a difference. And where there was a difference, the natives were more likely to be using those resources than the non-natives, than the immigrants. So it's stereotyping immigration or immigrants as, in a way, though it isn't doing it directly, it's giving that feeling. I would, and it's far too complicated to sit here on the fly and amend the whole thing to make it right. But I would welcome something maybe in the future that brings up the property aspect of it, but also, rather than kind of leading with this idea that immigrants are getting subsidized, lead with the idea that the problems that many people or at some point have in there something to the effect that many of the problems that people commonly associate with immigration are consequences of bad government policy that is not directly immigrant related, such as the welfare state, such as drug prohibition, such as prohibition of voluntary sex work. These are the things that enrich cartels. These are the things that maybe do attract some people who are looking to live off on the dole, just as people in the United States born here also live off the dole. That would be a better approach. Something that doesn't somehow make the immigrants seem somehow different. They're individuals. They just happen to be born somewhere else. That doesn't somehow single them out as something other than who the rest of us are.
All righty, I have Mr. Ensor, then Mr. Johnson. Mr. Ensor.
Well, I think it's pretty clear the writing is on the wall on this one. I won't spend too long speaking on this. I think, whatever flaws there are, I think it is in many ways an improvement, especially given much of what's going on. So the main thing I wanted to focus on is Well, two things. First of all, a very quick point. Trade and migration are not the same thing. And it's both a logical and strategic error to conflate them. Trade requires two actively consenting parties, including the invitation of the recipient to bring goods onto their property, while migration is very often unilateral. And second thing, the main thrust of this whole debate is the idea of what happens on public property, because we're all in agreement that there's no such thing as a right to trespass on private property. The thing is that in all too many cases, people like to talk about public property. Libertarians like to talk as if public property should just be open access commons. Anybody could come here. Well, I think it's flawed to simply treat it as that way, because, I mean, especially in the anarchist mindset, public property that is, maintained and developed using tax dollars, that's not unowned, it's stolen. And those who it was stolen from have a right to reclaim it. And it's not, and the fact that goods are stolen does not mean it is a libertarian ideal that anyone and everyone should have equal access to them from all around the world until such time as they're returned to their natives, to their rightful owners. Sorry. Like I said, I could go on any further, but I think I'll just end it there because it doesn't seem like this is going to go anywhere.
Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We spent a lot of time beating the horse very, very dead on what's wrong with the current plank. I agree with a lot of those. I think that the donut problem Ms. Harlow's mentioned is probably the most fatal one in terms of any premise that you can have some sort of way of blockading somebody out of a general region. Easements are part of every model of property rights because it doesn't work if you don't have concepts of easements. But I wanted to talk about the things that aren't in this to maybe help the committee with what might be included that could help a motion like this in the future. I think the strongest point that we have on this issue is the fact that we have a giant statue that is the logo of our party that has a poem right on it that gives a very differentiated stance on this issue from Democrats and Republicans right now. That is, every child in this nation, even if they go to a government school, will learn about this poem and will learn that this is the symbol of what we as Americans value. This is one of the few issues that we as libertarians have a completely free win on being aligned with what the basis of American culture is, even if it's not feeling like that at the moment. And to give up an area where we have such a strong grounding in American tradition seeds one of our strongest areas moving forward. And I think that makes any sort of move that starts to cast shadows on immigrants, as opposed to celebrating the benefits of immigration, very antithetical to the values that this party benefits most from projecting outward. This is also missing any talk about freedom of movement being a natural right, which is really the fundamental that'll tie back to the statement of principles, the idea that moving from A to B is a victimless crime in and of itself. And there's so much language spent in here trying to make it into a crime. And I think it's just backwards from where we naturally should be on this. And this plank tries to mask over that free movement of individuals is a natural right. Yes, people have been trying to do violence to people who move around, just like people have been enslaving people. People have been robbing and raiding people all the time. That doesn't make any of those things right. And the third point is that the way we message best on this issue in terms of a lot of the malignments that are happening, we see this a lot in Texas, is talking about this just like we talk about the war on drugs and homelessness, that these are prohibition problems. The symptoms we see of people running through private property and dying on private property, you think that their plan was to leave themselves as a dead body there. That probably wasn't the plan. These are all symptoms of the fact that you can't just drive along a highway very easily and go to wherever you want to go in America to find that job or whatever they're seeking. This is all a symptom of the fact that the government will take guns and shoot people, ultimately, if they try to go through the safe way, the non-intrusive way, and the nice way. So we need to speak consistently as we do on other issues that it is ultimately the government's use of force that is the source of so many of these problems. And yes, we can talk about that to the welfare side, and I agree with that, but that doesn't belong conjoined to this plank. That's the Republican talking point, and that's where you end up taking one leg of the state and using it to prop up the other, which is, well, the libertarian approach is we want to take all the legs out from under the state. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Is there any further debate on the main motion? Hearing none, since there is clearly objection to this, we will go ahead and move to a vote. Mr. Secretary, whenever you're ready.
All right, give me a minute.
Go ahead. While you're doing that, I will state the motion. The motion is to amend 3.4 free trade and migration, to strike the first two sentences, amend the third sentence so it reads, economic freedom demands the strike unrestricted, free movement, strike of human as well as financial capital across national borders, add of financial capital and goods, add sentences. However, since immigration affects individual and community property rights as well as security concerns, it is a matter that should be determined at the lowest authority levels possible. Government subsidization of unrestricted migration by providing free housing, transportation, and medical care is a violation of the property rights of taxpayers and communities. Ideally, all government land should be privatized, and each landowner, should be entitled to invite foreign guests onto their own property. Until such time as government is divested of all public lands, vetted individuals who pose no security concerns sponsored by a U.S. person should be admitted.
Why isn't this working? Bear with me here, folks. Alstead?
No.
Barber? Oh, he's absent. Benner?
Yes.
Bergman?
No.
Bowman?
No.
Brooksbank?
No.
Poco?
No.
Tyler?
Yes.
Inzer?
Yes.
Thompson?
No.
Let's see. Labrie?
Yes.
Leatherman?
No.
McCose?
No.
Melchin? Melchin?
No. No.
Okay, thank you. Thompson?
No.
All right, I'm going to cast a no. Mr. Chair, are you voting or not voting?
Chair is not voting.
All right, Mr. Chair, I see 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 ayes. 11 nays and 1 not voting.
Confirmed. By 4-11-0-1, the motion fails. So moving on to the next one here. Where in the what is going on? Hold on a second. There we go. Changing gears real quick. The next one on the agenda was Mr. Alsted's proposal to clean up the aggression plank. I'm bringing that up right now. Should be able to see that, I hope. So, Mr. Alsted, please go ahead.
Can you scroll up a little bit?
That's the top of it.
Scroll down a little bit, I mean.
Let me try to get it all on the screen here. The other way. There we go.
Yeah. Okay, so my problem with this one is just that it is so wordy. It was for those of you that don't remember, you probably all do remember. This was proposed from the floor at the end of the platform in the last convention. So it didn't come through the committee, and it's pretty obvious reading it that it's just written in a completely different voice. It sort of starts at first principles. So it's someone who maybe wasn't familiar with the other 29 planks that we have, because it's kind of repeats a lot of the same kind of some of the basic libertarian arguments that exist elsewhere in the platform. It has these weird parenthetical sentences which we don't have anywhere else in the platform. And it's just long. It's 8% of the current platform is this plank. It just really sticks out. I think we need to tighten it up and make it more in line with the rest of our platform. There are some good things in here, which is why I didn't propose to just scrap the whole thing. But I've tried to take out the stuff that is mentioned elsewhere and just leave what is unique to this plank. Thank you.
All righty. The proposal is to the following. In the title for 2.1, aggression, property, and contract, remove the word aggression and its following comma. Then in the body of the plank, strike the first 1, 2, 3 sentences. So that striking out the sentences, aggression is the use, trespass against, or invasion of the borders of another person's owned resource, parentheses, property, without the owner's consent or the threat thereof. We oppose all acts of aggression as illegitimate and unjust, whether committed by private actors or the state. Actually, there's 4 sentences here. Each person is the presumptive owner of his or her own body, parentheses, self-ownership, which right may be forfeited only as a consequence of committing an act of aggression. Property rights and external scarce resources are determined in accordance with the principles of original appropriation or homesteading, parentheses, whereby a person becomes an owner of an unowned resource by first use and transformation. Contract, parentheses, whereby the owner consensually transfers ownership to another person. And rectification, parentheses, whereby an owner's property rights in certain resources are transferred to a victim of the owner's tort, trespass, or aggression to compensate the victim, period. Next sentence, strike the word as, capitalize the word respect. For property rights is fundamental to maintaining a free and prosperous society. Add the words, attacks on private property are illegitimate and unjust, whether committed by private actors or the state. Strike the words, it follows that, form a new sentence, capitalize the, freedom to, old wording, the freedom to contract, the freedom to contract to obtain, retain, profit from, manage, and or dispose of one's property must, strike the word also, be upheld. Strike the following. Libertarians would free property owners from government restrictions on their rights to control and enjoy their property as long as their choices do not harm or infringe on the rights of others. Eminent domain, civil asset forfeiture, governmental limits on profits, governmental production mandates, and governmental controls on prices of goods and services, parentheses, including wages, rents, and interest, are abridgments of such fundamental rights. For voluntary dealings among private entities, parties should add the words, and each person must, original language, be free to choose with whom they trade and set whatever trade terms are mutually agreeable. Now I'm going to reread that with all what it would look like in final form, because there's a lot that's been stricken there. It would say as follows: 2.1, property and contract. Respect for property rights is fundamental to maintaining a free and prosperous society. Attacks on private property are illegitimate and unjust, whether committed by private actors or the state. The freedom to contract to obtain, retain, profit from, or manage or dispose of one's property must be upheld, and each person must be free to choose with whom they trade and set whatever trade terms are mutually agreeable. That is the proposal. Miss Eiler, you were first up.
I was just asking that things be read out loud since I don't have access to a screen right now. And you did.
Okay, gotcha.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnson, then Ms. Harlos.
I just had a few, I hope, non-controversial editorial fixes here that I wanted to suggest. In the title, we need to remove the comma between property and and. And for where it says attacks, there should be an and before attacks for the sentence to fit together. Otherwise, it's sentence fragments attached by a comma.
Quick pause. Is there objections to those technical amendments? Hearing none, we'll put those in real quick.
And then the one that
I was trying to get to a mic, Mr. Seaback.
I'm sorry, Ms. Harlos, go ahead.
The title is in accordance with the Chicago Manual of Style, and whoever is
Yeah, we
next.
only have 2 words left though, so there's no comma.
No, there is. It's a list. When you have more than 2 items in a list,
there's only 2.
Ms. Harlos, part of the motion was to strike the word.
Oh, never mind. I'm a dummy then. Just call me a dummy because I am. I'm having a terrible day. Thank you.
It's all good. And then I think it would be proper, so there would be an and there before attacks.
One moment, Mr. Johnson. One moment, please. Is there objection to adding the word and taking out that comma by anybody?
I don't think you have to take out the comma.
In the title?
Oh, yeah, in the title, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was referring to. Sorry, I wasn't clear on that.
And then the other one, which is the only one I could see having objection, would be after upheld. I think to be consistent with the prior sentence, you would want to have a comma before and each person must. Right on the other sides of that huge red block you're on.
So right, yeah. that.
Exactly.
Is there an objection adding the comma there? Hearing none, we'll call that good.
And that's all I had for that.
All righty. Did you wish to speak to the motion at all, sir?
No, I just want to listen to. I don't have a strong opinion yet.
All righty. Ms. Harless.
Okay. I love Stefan Kinsella beyond belief. I think this whole thing needs to be struck. I don't think it's savable, not because it's poorly written. It's because it's written as Mr. Kinsella writes. He writes books and he writes fantastic books. Go buy his books. But our platform's not a book. Actually, the only thing that I think could be salvaged is in something that's deleted, is a clear definition of aggression. We define property. Maybe it needs to be defined better, but if so, let's do it where it already talks about it. We already talk about contracts. We already talk about freedom of association. We already talk about the non-initiation of force. And we already talk about people should be able to trade with whom they want. All of this is said elsewhere in our platform. Now, maybe it's said a little badly. I think our freedom of association platform needs a lot of work because it says private organizations have the right to set whatever standards of association they want. And people have literally made the argument that it only means groups like the Moose Club, which is freaking ridiculous. So I do think we need to fix that. Somebody on the platform committee, please go look at that platform and propose an amendment. But all of this is said elsewhere. And we don't use the word aggression, by the way. As a party, we just don't, because there is justified aggression. If somebody shoots you and you kick the crap out of them, you certainly are committing aggression, but it's justified. That's why we consistently throughout the platform use the phrase non-initiation of force. Force is fine. Initiating it is not. Aggression is fine. Initiating is not. Now, I know people say that's implied in the word aggression. Nobody speaks our language like that. So with all due love and respect to Mr. Kinsella, I think he did point out by having to write a new plank that some of our other ones need reworking. Let's rework them rather than writing a whole new platform, like a whole new essay. I want to know where John Galt is when I start reading this.
I think he's on the third sentence. Mr. Enser.
So just a quick little history of this. You mentioned Stefan Kinsella. For the record, this particular wording that was passed, this was actually the first draft that he came up with, and he revised it like, I don't know, 5 or 6 times, but due to a miscommunication, it was the original draft that he himself said was overly wordy that actually got proposed. So, but yeah, I mean, there are, like he said, there are issues with this, but like as Ms. Harless mentioned, there is no other place where aggression is defined solidly, and I'd have to check it again to see if property is defined quite as solidly elsewhere in the platform. And I would also challenge the idea that of justified aggression, because I would say that the situation that you described, that is defensive force. So,
Mr. Brooksbank.
Yes, I would be voting for this because I'm all in favor of getting rid of unnecessary fluff and just sticking to it, and I think this amendment does that. If we want to define aggression, we could do it elsewhere. Thank you.
Ms. Leatherman.
Yeah, hi. So I agree that this is needlessly wordy and definitely needs to be cleaned up. I do think that it's important for us to clearly define how we define property rights. So I was wondering if it was possible to make a motion to restore that third sentence: the property rights and external scarce resources are determined in accordance with if that was possible.
I believe it is in order. And if Ms. Harlows wants to correct me if I'm getting my interpretation on the amendment wrong, please go ahead. But I believe that would be in order. So, Ms. Leatherman, are you proposing to restore all of what I have highlighted here?
Yes.
All righty. Then I'm going to do that. Hope everybody can read that. So that is the first, second. It's actually the fourth sentence. That's okay.
Whoops.
It's easy to see how they run together. Do you wish to speak further to that, Ms. Leatherman?
No, I think that's good.
All righty. Is there anybody who wishes to speak to the amendment? I still have Ms. Harlows and Mr. Alsted in the queue for the main.
Oh, I already spoke to the main, but I would like to speak to the amendment.
Go ahead.
I would suggest again, I think, I don't know, was it Luke that spoke? No, we do not clearly define property in our platform. And during a past term, there was a resolution which I could dig up that tried to do so. This was during the heyday of libertarian socialism and the party, and it failed to pass the LNC. I can assure you I was not one of the no votes. I think maybe we should start looking at some of that language, because this amendment has way too many parentheses in it. Like, what and whereby it reads like, ye old street reader reading out the news. And plus, it says property rights and external scarce resources, which kind of conflicts with the whole idea that you own your body, like, which is you. I don't think you would consider that an external resource. I would love to see a plank that defines property well. I don't think this does that. So I would highly suggest that this whole thing again be scrapped and somebody come back with a concise, stylistically consistent definition of property and just leave it at property in our platform. If somebody thinks they need to define contract, that should be separate. And if someone thinks they need to define, I wouldn't use the word aggression. It's not used anywhere else in our platform except for in this plank. The party, and even the party pledge doesn't use it. It's non-initiation of force. Like it or not, that is the phraseology that's in the veins of the party. Aggression is just not a term we use. And please, somebody change the freedom of association plank. But I don't think this is salvageable. And considering it was a first draft, I mean, if we wanted to revise it, why don't we go ask Mr. Kinsella for his final draft? Thank you.
One second here. Mr. Secretary, Ms. Cliff is entering the meeting. Mr. Alsted, did you wish to speak to the main or the amendment?
Both, I guess. I did want to speak to this amendment.
Go ahead.
Repeat a lot of what Ms. Harlow said, that this has a lot of the grammatical and stylistic problems that don't need to be in there. Also, we don't really define anything in our platform, and that's kind of what makes it so concise and so tight, is that it isn't a textbook on libertarianism 101. And I mean, if we want to include that, we could, but it would just be a much different platform. So I mean, I'd prefer to leave this sentence out.
Is any further discussion on the amendment? Okay, so it's pretty clear there's some objection. We will take this to a vote. Mr. Secretary, when you're ready, the amendment is to restore the fourth sentence in the blank.
All right, voting on the amendment. Alvstad,
No.
Benner,
Yes.
Bergman,
No.
Bowman,
Yes.
Brooksbank,
No.
Chilco,
Abstain.
Eiler,
Yes.
Enzer,
Yes.
Johnson,
I'll pass.
Labrie,
Yes.
Leatherman,
Yes.
McCose,
No.
Melchin,
No.
Thompson,
No.
and Mr. Johnson. You asked me to pass. We're back to you.
I'll not vote.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Montoni, Mr. Sheriff, Mr. Secretary, are you voting?
Actually, I'm going to pass on this one myself. Not voting.
You're not voting. Can you give me your numbers, please?
And you're not voting, correct?
I haven't decided yet. I need the numbers first.
Okay. I see 6 ayes. And 6 nays. So far, 2 not voting and 1 abstention.
This is why I asked. It's kind of important. The chair is not going to vote on this.
Okay, then just the 1 or the not voting numbers change to 3 instead of 2.
Yeah, so at 6, 6, 1, and 3, the motion to amend fails. We're back on the main motion, and I had Ms. Harlos and Mr. Alstad, then Mr. Ensor.
Oh, it was just the amendment that failed. Oh,
Yes.
then I actually, I didn't mean to have my hand up. You can take, I'm done right now. I said enough.
Mr. Alstad?
Well, yeah, I was going to ask about the streamlined version that Mr. Kinsella constructed, but I see that Mr. Ensor has already posted it. I assume that's what he's going to speak on, so I guess I'll defer to him.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up because I did remember he posted about it, so I went digging and I found it. It's not.
You were
It
next
is still
anyway,
a little
sir.
wordy. Sorry, say again.
You were next.
Yeah, so as you can see, I linked in the chat to the blog post that Mr. Kinsella made where he did include the final streamlined version. It is still somewhat wordy, but I think it is better. And if it's in order, I'd like to offer it as a substitute to this main motion.
Um,
Or is that not in order?
it's in order. I'm reading it myself here. Bear
Yeah, I
with
mean,
me.
like I said, it's wordy enough that I couldn't even fit it in a single message. So
No, I get it. Could you bear with me one moment, please?
yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'm looking for differences here too, by the way.
Gotcha. Yeah. Sorry, I wish I thought to bring this up in email.
Looking at this text, the only difference is in the sentence, if I'm reading this correctly, the sentence that says laws or policies such as but not limited to eminent domain and so on is the only change is that specific sentence.
Even the first sentence is different.
Aggression is okay, yes, the first sentence has changed a little bit too. But the rest of it is identical.
Okay.
We can move this as a substitute, but I'll point out we only have 20 minutes left in the session.
Yeah, I did notice that. I don't know if there's going to be much appetite for it, so I think I think I'll withhold.
All righty, Mr. Cholko?
Is a motion to postpone this to a date certain in order?
It is.
Okay, I don't actually know if I want to make that. I'm just thinking about that for a second. But I guess we're about to move to a vote, huh?
Unless there's any more debate, yes.
All right. Well, I'm not going to make that motion, but I'd probably support one if the rest of the committee feels like they want it. Somebody else take the pulse and offer it.
Any further debate on the motion? Hearing none, because I'm pretty sure there's objection, we will move to a vote. Actually, I'll just ask anyway. Is there objection to the amendment, to the motion as written?
I'll object.
Yeah, me too. Sorry.
That's fine. Mr. Secretary, we'll move to a vote whenever you're ready.
Mr. Chair, the language that's on your screen, is that the same as what's in the document?
Correct. There has been no changes except for, well, excuse me, there's been a couple of minor technical changes. We took out the comma after property up in the title, and we added one down here at and I think there's one other. Oh, we added an and right here before a tax as well. But what you have highlighted is what we're dealing with.
One moment.
Well, the secretary's point is getting that set up. I will point out, Ms. Harlow said in the chat, you can postpone this indefinitely. Then it can be brought up whenever. Normally, that is not necessarily true, but because we're in multiple sessions of these, or multiple meetings of the same session, that is true with a motion to reconsider. Parliamentary thing there.
All right, Mr. Chair, I'm ready. Mr. Ofsted.
Aye.
If you said Benner, no.
Yes.
Bowman.
No.
Brooksbank.
Yes.
Coco.
Abstain.
Tyler.
Abstain.
Windsor.
No.
Johnson.
No.
Lebree.
No.
Leatherman.
Abstain.
Mathos.
No.
Melchin.
No.
Thompson.
No.
And I am going to vote nay. Mr. Chair, what is your vote?
Chair is not voting.
All right, one moment. Mr. Chair, I see three ayes. Nine nays, three abstentions, and one not voting.
Confirmed, the motion fails. We still have 15 minutes left, so we will proceed to the next one, international affairs, which is actually very short. Let me do a quick switch. And
I actually see it just there.
There it is. This is very simple, straightforward, to the point. We talk about peace, we forget about the other pieces attached to it of war, invasion, and occupation. Add words to include them. This is mine. It's very straightforward. In the second sentence, add the words after economic sanction, aggressive war, invasion, and occupation, and then before regime change. So read 3.3 International Affairs. American foreign policy should emphasize peace with all nations, entangling alliances with none. We would end the current U.S. government policies of foreign intervention, including military and economic aid, tariffs, economic sanctions, add the words aggressive war, invasion, and occupation, and regime change. We recognize the right of all people to resist tyranny and defend themselves and their rights. We condemn the use of force, especially the use of terrorism against the innocent, regardless of whether such acts are committed by government or by political or revolutionary groups. One quick moment, I have to make some notes here. And I have Mr. Ensor, Mr. Johnson, Mr. McCose, and Mr. Benner, and a dryer. Mr. Ensor.
Yep, just real quick, I'm in favor of this. It's principled, it's libertarian, and it's what we want.
Mr. Johnson.
Yeah, I want to channel the spirit of the brevity caucus here. We clearly stated in the first sentence American foreign policy should emphasize peace. I think it's pretty clear from that already that our position is against these things. And we also, the committee already recommended another place in the Veterans Amendment that would include similar language to this. I feel like this just makes it longer and harder to fit on graphics that we love to put out about this sort of stuff. I don't think the extra wordiness actually adds either any clarity or anything else. I mean, I agree 100% with the wording. I just don't think it adds anything to the plank to do it.
Mr. McCose.
I would like to just make an amendment, just a small amendment to this. I would like to strike the word aggressive. That's it. Because there's no other type of war other than aggressive war. It's kind of implied when you talk about war. So that's it.
If anybody wishes to speak to the amendment.
Uh-huh.
Yes.
Who was that? Yes.
I said yes as well.
I heard Ms. Harlow. Who was the second one?
Mr. Enzer.
Thank you.
And Mr. Brooksbank.
All righty. Ms. Harlow, go ahead.
I think there are such things. I don't think war implies aggression at all. I think there is such a thing as a defensive war. That's it.
Mr. Ensor.
Yeah, just to echo that, while we may not see it virtually at all, there is such a thing conceptually as defensive war.
Mr. Brooksbank.
Ditto.
After those comments, I will remove my amendment, or however you say that.
That's not in order at the moment because there's still people wishing to speak on it. I will speak real fast and say agree with the previous commenters. Mr. Bowman.
Yeah, as a non-interventionist, I usually, and here's the thing, I can understand removing aggressive as a way of implying that the word intervention implies aggression, but and on the other hand, it may not be clear to most people that we do believe in defense, and that would be a non-aggressive war. And so, and thinking about it, in a defensive action could intervene in the affairs of the country that's attacking. So I suppose we should keep it there just as an emphasis for clarity.
All righty. Is there anybody else who wishes to speak on the amendment?
Chair, point of information, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I'm looking in the shared drive and I see two documents that are 3.3 international affairs. Which one are we working on?
You're looking in the drafts folder, correct?
Yes. Proposals, drafts.
One quick moment.
The one that was edited most recently.
Yeah, what is that other one? One quick moment, folks. That's a good question. There's two of them in here. Let me look at the March 13th one real fast. That appears to be the right one, but hang on. You ask a great question. Okay, they're actually saying the same thing. So we actually have a duplicate in the drafts, which is why I understand why you were having confusion. The correct one is the one that's got the 949 timestamp on it.
Is that the one with the aggressive highlighted red?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I've got it then. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna remove the other one from the directory because that was, I don't know why we got a duplicate there, but we did. So anyway, back to this. Thank you for
I don't need any help to be confused.
I apologize for that. Okay, Mr. Benner, I still had you down for the main motion.
Yeah, only main motion for me.
All righty. Is there any further debate on the amendment? Since there's clearly objection to the amendment, Mr. McCose did state an interest in withdrawing the amendment. Is there objection by the body to having the amendment withdrawn?
I object. Or wait, are we talking about the amendment to the amendment?
The amendment to strike the word aggressive.
Oh, okay. No, never mind. I don't object.
Alrighty, with hearing no objection from the body, that amendment is withdrawn. We are then back to the main motion and Mr. Benner.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I like your amendment. I just have a friendly stylistic amendment to propose. I move to amend that we strike the and replace the semicolon with a comma. Because we'd be saying and occupation and regime change.
I would point out that in this specific case, in this sentence, the list of items is set off by semicolons previously.
I see now. I withdraw my concern. Sorry.
Yeah, this is a kind of an odd sentence in the platform because of those semicolons. I believe it historically that is a residue of previous wording in the plank that had since been amended. But at the same time, it fits the bill for keying aggressive war, invasion, occupation together for this purpose.
Yeah, I see the point now. I withdraw if I can.
Yeah, no problem. Mr. Brooksbank, you were next.
Yes, I'll speak in favor of this proposal. Although oh, never mind. I'm sorry. It's late.
Okay, I just want to do a quick chime in real fast. When I wrote this, at the time, I based this on the idea of no guarantees that the veterans planks were going to ever get approved or heard. But I also felt this was important enough that we had to have it in here somewhere. And to be honest, if we emphasize this in more than one place, yeah, we might be a little repetitive, but I think it's that important. Okay, I think it is that important. I was there back in 2010 in St. Louis when the Peace with All Nations was put back in this plank. And it was huge at the time. It was a major win for the platform. And adding a little extra emphasis on the fact we're talking peace, we're talking aggression, we're not talking defensive here. And yes, it is possible to have an occupation without being aggressive. It sucks, but it is possible. The so-called peacekeepers. I don't agree with it, but that's some justification. So I think this is a good emphasis to add it in. And the worst case scenario, if the delegates think it's redundant, they can vote it down. And yes, the chat is being weird. And there are no such thing as a-hole amendments. Is there any further debate on the main motion? Is there any objection to the main motion? Hearing none, it passes. And I thank you all for that. We are at 9:57. At this point, we are 3 minutes from being completed. I don't think we're going to be able to get to the next one tonight. So I would suggest that we make that our break point, and
I move to adjourn.
if there is a motion to adjourn, is there any?
Second.
There's a second. Is there any objection to adjourning a minute or two early? Hearing none, we are adjourning at 9:58. I am stopping the recording.